possible to create a successful sewing business making desirable products using scraps that allows you to leave your corporate job? Spoiler alert, yes. Amazing co-host Kat Camfield talks to Justice McNeil about the origin story of her inspiring business, Thread and Sprout, and how it's evolved into something quite different but equally inspiring. This is the first part of 2 episodes with Kat and Justice, so stick around a couple of minutes and we'll get stuck into part 1. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 18 years and I'm the creator and the host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises. And I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely listener. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with the podcast today. So I want to jump straight in with an amazing, inspiring sustainability win shared by Kerry via the Check Your Thread Patreon community. Kerry writes, I've just moved house, which is always a very confronting experience when it comes to realising just how much stuff you have. So I took it as a sign and a challenge to try and pass some things into new hands. Over the last 6 weeks or so, I've managed to sell 21 items on Vinted, a mix of clothes, books, fabric and trinkets, for a total of £213. Donate around 20 items of clothing directly to refugee families living in the UK via the Give Your Best website, costing around £27 in postage. Give away over 20 items directly to people in my previous local community, including 3 bags of fabric scraps and a bag of fabric remnants to someone just starting on their sewing journey. So pleased that all these items have had their life extended a little longer. Kerry, as I said in my reply to you on your post, moving is such a stressful and time-consuming thing to do anyway, and the fact that you found the additional time and energy to rehome so many items so thoughtfully is a huge credit to you. I wish you every happiness in your new home, and thank you for sharing. Speaking of patrons, it has been a wonderful week for amazing listeners switching over to sustaining member status. Huge thanks to Alison, Kate, Ananda, Laura and Jackie, all of whom signed up to support the making of this podcast via Patreon over the last week or so. If you want in on the gorgeous and supportive Check Your Thread Patreon community, you can do so for literally any amount per month that makes sense for you. Please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread for info, and signing up takes less than 2 minutes. So this week, we've got a really lovely conversation. Well, the first part of it. I've had my eye on Justice from Thread and Sprout as a potential guest for a long time. I'd clocked her interest in sustainability as well as her unique creativity, and I thoroughly enjoy receiving her newsletters. Anyway, at some point I mentioned to guest host Kat that I'd like Justice on the podcast, and Kat replied that she already knew her, having taken one of her workshops. So it seemed ideal that Kat field this one, having already developed some rapport with and knowledge of Justice's working practices. So, listening to their conversation in the edit, I discovered that they had covered so many super interesting and important topics, and I really wanted to let it all have the space that it deserves. So yeah, I decided to put this out as a 2-parter. This part covers Thread and Sprout's super fascinating origin story. And honestly, who doesn't want to hear of someone managing to get out of a soul-destroying corporate job using their creativity in a way that has reduced negative impact on the planet? So until next week, when you must make sure you come back for part 2 of their conversation, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and think about trying to pass on some items you no longer need to those in your wider community who could benefit from them. And enjoy.
Oh, Justice, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to let me pick your brain about your amazing, beautiful business.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to start out our interview in true Check Your Thread style, which is by asking you, can you tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Yeah. My name is Justice McNeil Sumser. I am based out of San Francisco, California, and my days are filled with everything. A little bit of everything. It's a lot of sewing, but not as much sewing as it used to be, and now it's a lot more time doing pattern drafting and writing instructions and content for classes on my computer. A lot of time in my movement practice doing yoga and dancing and Pilates. And lately a lot of physical therapy.
Physical therapy for yourself?
Yes. Well, maybe we can talk about that later.
We
because
can.
Because of sewing, I have some injuries that I'm now working through.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time hanging out with my dog and my husband and building Legos and playing music and being silly goofballs.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like you're living the life. That sounds really, really good. Aside from maybe the physical therapy
Yeah.
pain part. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm very curious to find out how you decided to start Thread and Sprout. Can you talk to me a little bit about the foundations of your business, and was your decision to start the business a reaction to something that was going on in your life or in the world?
Yeah. I feel like talking about the beginning of Thread and Sprout like requires like going back in time to like basically my childhood.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so it's like a long journey. I have always been very into getting dressed and clothes. Since I was very little, my mom likes to tell a story of like basically having to wrestle 2-year-old me to get me to put on jeans and take off my fairy wings and tutu. And then her realizing like, it's not worth it. Just let me wear the fairy wings and tutu. And that then morphed into learning how to sew when I was in like first grade, and my entire childhood, adolescence, I was making my own clothes. And I also had this like little spunky entrepreneurial spirit where in 5th grade, I started a bag making company for my school where I like was making these book bags, and I had a sign up list in the library if people wanted to buy them, and they were $5.
Amazing.
And so I think that just like had the seeds of through my entire childhood. I was constantly like, how can I make things and then figure out how to like have a business? And I didn't even really realize that's what it was. And then I went to school for fashion journalism and have a degree in fashion journalism and graphic design, and had sort of taken a break from sewing. And I worked in tech for a while after I graduated. And then I worked in the cosmetics industry for a clean beauty brand doing luxury cosmetics, which is not something I ever would have thought I would have gotten into. I don't wear makeup. I don't care about it. Suddenly I was the creative director for a cosmetics company. And I was feeling like it was sucking my soul out. And like there were some parts of it that were really awesome and a lot that was really, really draining and pretty toxic work environment. So during that time, I got back into sewing, mostly just to have like a creative outlet that wasn't designing ads telling people they need to buy makeup.
Yeah.
And so I started making my own clothes again. And then it's like I got that spark back of like, oh, right, I like to make things for other people. So in like 2018, I set up a website. My husband, who was at the time my boyfriend, helped me come up with the name Thread and Sprout because I was coming up with all these names that were like very esoteric and like based off of yogic philosophy and stuff. And he was like, well, that's all very nice, but also kind of sounds a little pretentious. And also, like no one knows what it means. So he was like, why don't you do Thread and Sprout? Because, you like sewing and you like plants and you'd like to talk about growing. So that's where Thread and Sprout came. And so I set up this website and I listed a few things that I had made to sell. And for 2 years, like nothing sold. But I kept doing it and it was fun. And I started sharing what I was making on Instagram and started connecting with the sewing community on Instagram. And then eventually, like what real birth of Thread and Sprout came out of the reaction of working for a few years in this toxic work environment. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And I was one of 4 people who did not lose my job at my company, but the cosmetics industry just like went stale because everyone was at home. No one's buying makeup. So I had a job still, and they're masking. So like there was nothing I could.
What's the point? Yeah.
Like my only thing I was selling at that time was our like chapstick.
Oh yeah.
Our like version of chapstick. So I suddenly had all this time at home. I still had a job, but like I didn't really have anything to do, and I was sewing, and I was feeling so. I mean, I just like everything felt so crazy. I was like so scared, so anxious, and also was like something can happen, and I can just lose my job at any moment. Like I was lucky that I kept my job. I was like, I don't know how long this will last. So I then started putting more work, like serious work, into Thread and Sprout. I designed my first nature dress, which is the earth dress, which is what I'm wearing today, which was a dress made with 7 different colors sewn together in curved color blocking. And that was the first thing I listed on my Thread and Sprout website that like people were like, oh, yes, I want that.
And Justice, sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'm just curious though. So up until that point, what were you trying to sell on your website? What were you making? So it wasn't the nature dress, but
It
what
wasn't
was the
it was
precursor?
like it was still like loose linen, oversized shirts and dresses, but they were painted
They were painted?
and block printed. So I had like painted
Oh,
abstract shapes on them.
that's so cool.
They were really cool. And like looking back, I feel a little bit of like a, ooh, those aren't good. Feeling
Oh,
like, oh, that's a little bit embarrassing. But also
aw.
like I can see how like they actually were pretty cool. And there's still I met somebody a few weeks ago who was wearing one of them.
Oh, amazing. So they definitely resonated with some people.
Yeah, some people got them. It like I think I had things listed for like a year and a half, and then eventually like some people bought them. But in spring of 2020, I started making these nature dresses, which was very much a reaction of the pandemic, of
Mhm.
wanting to make things that were colorful and reminded me of like nature and things that brought me joy, and not having access to fabric shops. So I had to work with what I
Oh,
had.
gosh.
So since I had been sewing for a long time, I had this stash of like yard and half yard remnants of linen color in all these different colors. So I figured out how to sew those together in a way that looked like rolling hills or waves. And so I started making the nature dress, and that was really so I just had this whole long story that like all of that other stuff then came together into like really Thread and Sprout like becoming a thing. Like I started getting requests for like custom orders. So from the spring of 2020 to the spring of 2021, I was still working my job in the cosmetics world and really started building Thread and Sprout, and was getting enough orders that after a year of that, I was like, oh, I'm making more doing this little side hustle than I was at my full-time job that was completely draining me. And more, I just felt this like incongruence of it does not feel
Mm.
right for with my beliefs to be selling makeup, both for I mean, it was clean beauty, like it was relatively good for the planet, but it still is like very resource heavy. And while I am not against wearing makeup, it just felt weird trying to sell that.
Especially something it's like you didn't use it yourself.
Yeah. So I had to like be this, like pretend to be this whole different person at that job because I had to wear makeup. I had to dress very corporate-y, wear high heels. I was like, this does not feel like me at all. And
It doesn't
I,
sound like you. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know you super well, but I'm like with your aesthetic and everything. I'm like, no.
And like the few times I would try to wear more of like me clothes to work, I got looks and comments of like, "Oh, that's such an interesting outfit."
Oh my
It's
gosh.
just so after a year of that, I was like, "Hey, like I don't have to do this anymore. Like I can leave this job." And Thread and Sprout seems to be working. So in spring of 2021, I left that job, and I had come up with I like made this whole business plan for Thread and Sprout. I presented it to my husband and my parents because I was like, I need somebody's approval that I can do this.
Yeah.
And I left that job and started Thread and Sprout full time. And then since then, it has morphed and changed. But I launched right into doing made to order collections of nature dresses. and it was
That's
awesome.
so super cool. I love that. I love that. You know how people sometimes talk about it's easier to create when there are constraints? And I don't know if you find that true, but it was so interesting that your first nature dresses were literally like, I've only got access to my stash.
Yeah.
What can I pull out of my stash that I can use? And that's like still the aesthetic that your dresses and your everything you make is still like patchy and multicolored and fun and very seems very deliberate, but it's super cool that it came out of this like restriction.
Yeah, I think that that's like how that idea. I don't know that I could have done it if I didn't have that restriction, because when I had access to everything, it was like, oh, there's so many options, I don't even know what to make.
Yeah.
And like the very first Earth dress I made, I'm not wearing the very first one because the very first one has like completely disintegrated. But like I wanted a dress that was red, pink, yellow, brown, green, and then two shades of blue to represent various different parts of the Marin Headlands where I lived at the time. And I didn't have a yellow. So the yellow on that first one is actually like a scrap of linen that I dyed with the onion skins that I
Oh, that's brilliant.
stored. So it really was using like the things I had available.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
And so you said
Mhm.
you when you started the business, it was mostly making the nature dresses and you were doing it as custom orders for people. And then so how has your
Yeah.
business evolved from that point to now? Because I guess that's like 5 years later.
So yeah, at the beginning it was made to order drops where I'd like come up it was a combination of things. It was these made to order drops where I'd come up with a design or a few of nature dresses that were there was like the earth dress which had these 7 colors, and then I had like the Mount Tam dress, which Mount Tam is a mountain here in the Bay Area that was a dress that was inspired by the fog rolling over the hills. And so I had a few different of these dresses that were different colorways, and I would do made to order shop updates where I had like a certain number I knew I could make in 6 weeks and would fill those spots. And then after that, I started adding in ready to ship drops that were a collection of nature tops. So not the full dress, just like a boxy top. It started out mostly made with the leftover scraps. So whatever colors I from the dresses. So trying to use up the smaller pieces. And then after a while, I started doing custom orders where someone would reach out and request a custom dress or top. And then I started adding in a few other options, like I had tunics. I started doing some jackets. And so the custom orders where people would request like a specific colorway or send me photos of their favorite landscape where they have vacationed. And then I would design something based off of that. And that was very much the model of my business for 2 or 3 years. And I started playing around with other things, making like wall hangings that were landscapes that were the smaller scraps of fabric stitched together. And then those like patched together pieces then would become the curves of the landscape. And then during that time, I did release 2 tutorials that were how to make your own nature top that didn't include a pattern, but I had enough people asking me, it was mostly,
Yeah.
I really love this, I want it, but I can't afford it. So I'd love to make my own. And so I figured out how to do some tutorials that was, you have to choose your own base pattern, but here's how to do the curved color blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed making those tutorials. And after about, I'd say 3 years of this business model of basically being like a one-man sweatshop, like sewing constantly, like 8 hours to 10 hours a day at the
Oh
sewing machine, I hit a
no.
point of major burnout.
Oh.
It was also like coincided with some like big mental health issues I was going through and other stuff in my life, and hit a point of like, this needs to change. I cannot keep doing this. And so that's when I started trying to figure out what else can I do. It also really coincided with a big change in my work. So I still was making the nature dresses, but I started making some other things I'm still trying to figure out how to describe it. The magic vest was born out of that, and these pieces that were included a lot more applique and embroidery and imagery and symbolism that was very much connected to a search for more meaning in things. A lot of my
Mm-hmm.
work sort of has like esoteric symbolism included in it, sort of related imagery that represents, I don't know how to really describe this, a lot of my like spiritual beliefs started making its way into my work as a way to sort of kind of use my work basically as therapy
Ah.
as I was going through this really hard time of like the nature dresses I loved, but they started feeling very repetitive
Mm-hmm.
and not actually expressing myself.
Mm.
And became something that like I could do in my like I could make like 4 dresses and have no memory of doing it because it's like
Oh,
this is
wow.
just robotic at that point. And so I wanted something that felt more creative. And so I started making these other pieces, the magic vest, which is a quilted vest covered in symbolism. And then I was like, well, I'm still burned out because I'm still sewing
Mm.
constantly and having to do these big drops of work. So I started exploring other options. My husband was really helpful because he is also an artist. He's 10 years older than me, so he has a lot of experience of being a self-employed artist. And
Uh-huh.
his like refrain for the last 5 years has been like, you need non-shippable goods. You need non-shippable goods.
What does that look like? Yeah.
So I was like, I don't even know what that means. And so that's how I started diving into making patterns and more
Mm-hmm.
tutorial offerings.
Mm-hmm.
And I took an online class with another maker that I really loved. And I was like, oh, like I could teach classes. That sounds cool. And one of my past life favorite jobs I ever had was teaching summer classes for kids at a theater camp.
Oh,
So it's
cool.
like, I love teaching. I love teaching art. I could just do that online. So a year and a half ago, started teaching my online Magic Fest class, and it like healed something in me. It made me love my work again, and it was like, oh, I can not have to sew every day for 10 hours in order to still be self-employed and get to have this job that I love. So then I developed more classes. So now my work has really shifted from I really don't make things to sell anymore.
Wow.
At this moment, it might come back, and it's a lot more. I make patterns and teach these classes. I've also started teaching online yoga classes specifically for sewists, and yeah, so that's how it's grown and morphed. And there's been lots of other trial and error in there, and seasons of doing a lot of markets and all
I
sorts of
love
things.
it's such a cool evolution, and I love that your business has gone from this like full time, like really intense production for people that you don't necessarily know. You're just putting it out there to something. It just sounds like the evolution of your business has brought you closer and closer to yourself, and like really like there's so much heart in the work you do, and you're making something that's more sustainable for you both physically and then financially, and that's amazing. I love it. I was so blessed that I got to take your Magic Vest class last year at a time when I was also going through like major transition because I'd been co-owner of this fabric store, and sadly we'd had to close it for financial reasons, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with myself? And then soon after that, I signed up for your Magic Vest class, and I still like adore the vest. I put crows on it because where I live in Victoria, there's lots of crows around. I live by the water, and so I get to watch them play. And I put on the back, for people who don't know, Justice's magic vests they have images that you applique on, and then at the back there's something she calls nature portal. And for mine, I put an image of looking out at the lake at my cottage, which is way on the east coast of Canada. And then I put some words at the top. It's just the whole process was magical. It felt very much like a production of something out of me that you facilitated. And it just feels really good to wear because it's so me. And then I get lots of questions and comments about it from people. So it leads to really cool conversations. So I highly recommend taking one of Justice's classes if you can, because they're super rich. And you also, I remember in our class, we're also integrating some personal self-care as well, which was really cool. It was artistic, it was inspirational, it was awesome. So I'm really glad you started teaching. Yeah.
Yay, that makes me so happy to hear. Thank you. It means a lot to me to hear you say that. So thank you.
Aw, you're welcome.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!